Hello everyone, it's Nick. Hope you guys are doing great. I'm certainly glad to be back on this thing after a week off. So here I go with this video about this year's San Francisco Giants. Going into the 2021 MLB season, ESPN gave them just a 1.2% chance of making the postseason. They have the third oldest average age in Major League Baseball, and they were looked at as just a bunch of misfits going into this season. The only position players that have gotten quality playing time for this Giants team this year that are under 30 are Steven Duggar and LaMonte Wade Jr. Against all odds, here the San Francisco Giants are, now with the best record in baseball. How? So before we go any further, if you like what you're seeing, please consider dropping a like. That'd be much appreciated. That's how we get this out to more people. If you can please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell if you're new here. Your support would be much appreciated. Links to my social media are in the description down low. So first we have to start with the pitching. The main thing that the Giants have gone beyond anyone's expectations with. Who would have thought Kevin Gausman, a guy that's 30 years old now, never panned out before? I remember him being so bad for the Orioles. Who would have thought that he'd be in the Cy Young conversation right now? Well, 2014 and 16 were alright years for him, but other years, not at all. Yes, he is coming off a rough outing, and yes, he hasn't been sharp in the second half of the season. He did do well last month, just not so much in July or this month. Even in July though, he did have two good starts, and earlier this month, yeah, his good outings were against the Rockies and Cubs, but hey, they still count. Overall, he's still having a great year. I can't imagine anyone actually expecting this out of him going into the season. So how he got here. He was actually once a top prospect for the Orioles, a 4th overall pick actually, and he just didn't pan out. Then he got traded to the Braves during the 2018 season and actually looked like he was going to pan out as he put up a 2.87 ERA and 10 starts with the Braves that year. However, he struggled mightily the following year and the Braves released him. He finished the year with the Reds and didn't do so great for them either. December of 2019, Gausman signed a 1-year deal with the San Francisco Giants. He had a decent year last year in 12 appearances, 10 starts. That got him a qualifying offer of $18.9 million this year, but nobody could have predicted that he'd have a 2.92 ERA or a whip of 1.06 this deep into the season. Or he'd have a K rate anything close to what it was last year. His K to walk percentage is actually the one thing that he did better last year. His K rate actually did dip from 32.2% to around 29% this year, while his walk rate went from 6.5% to almost 7% this year. And those percentages equate to a 22.3 K to walk percentage. That's still very good though. I did watch this latest game against the Padres. I saw that he has a 47% chase rate with 2 strikes. It's probably still roughly the same even after this game, right? Whether it is or not, that's still really impressive. If you really thought a guy who's 30 years old and has yet to really establish himself would have the kind of year that he's having right now, kudos to you. I really can't imagine that anyone could have actually expected this though. You don't see players at any position in any sport break out at 30 years old very often. The closest I can think of off the top of my head in baseball is Max Scherzer at 28. There is Rich Gannon in football who broke out at 34 years old. If you're really not lying that you saw this coming from Kevin Gausman, that's just amazing. Also, how about that walk-off sac fly he hit a few days ago? That doesn't change my stance that the universal DH absolutely needs to be a thing, but that was still cool to see. Let's move on to Anthony DeSclefani now. Another guy who's having a career year in his 30s. He has a career ERA of 4.09 and a career whip of 1.254. Last season, 9 appearances, 7 starts. In the 60-game season, he had an ERA of 7.22 and a whip of 1.693. This year, he has an ERA of 3.23 and a whip of 1.09. How does this happen? Even though he hasn't had the sharpest second half either, there's still no way anyone anticipated his numbers on the season to look anything like what they do now. Well, maybe if you are in that small percentage, again, kudos to you, but chances are, if you're going to say that you expected this out of Kevin Gausman or Anthony DeSclefani, you're probably lying. Now on to Logan Webb, a third-year pitcher. He's actually still pretty young at 24, but he's another guy having a breakout year in fewer appearances than Gausman or DeSclefani, but also I don't think anyone expected him to be as good as he's been this year. He definitely cannot go without being mentioned, as he posted an ERA over 5 and a whip over 1.4 in both of his first 2 seasons. 2019 was only 8 games, last year 13 appearances and 11 starts in the 60-game season. He had really bad control problems last year, as he walked 9.8% of the batters he's faced and led the league in hit batters last year. This year, he has an ERA of 2.79, a whip of 1.096. His K rate has shot through the roof up to 26.6%, and his walk rate is down to 6%. Again, how can you anticipate this? He also hasn't gone less than 6 innings since July 21st. Unlike Gausman and DeSclefani, Logan Webb has had a very strong second half this season. We can't forget their bullpen though, as this team has the best bullpen ERA and whip, as well as the second lowest opponent's batting average. Last year, the Giants bullpen ranked 12th in ERA, 17th in whip, and 15th in opponent's batting average. Jake McGee, one of their new additions this year. He pitched really well for the Dodgers last year. Not so much before that. This year, when healthy though, he's done a great job for the Giants. Right now he's on the IL though. Thanks to Tyler Rogers, the Giants have been fine without Jake McGee. He got a little roughed up last night, but he's still doing really well for the whole season, as he's posting a ERA of 2.16, a whip of 1.027, and a FIP of 3.34 in 75 appearances. Rogers hasn't struck out a whole lot of batters, but his command is just so on point, walking just 4% of the batters he's faced this year. There's also Jose Alvarez, Zach Littell, and Dominic Leone, who are also pitching absolutely lights out of the bullpen. We have to give Andrew Bailey, the Giants pitching coach, a huge hand for this. The Giants should give him a lifelong contract for what he's been able to do with the top 3 starters that nobody could have seen leading one of the best rotations in baseball, for what he's done with the bullpen. More than doubling Logan Webb's sinker usage rate, almost doubling his curveball usage rate while cutting down his changeup and really cutting down his fastball usage rate has really done him wonders. Same with having Kevin Gausman throw his splitter more while throwing less changeups and sliders. Yeah, the splitter was not really working against the Padres in this latest game, but for most of the season it very much has been. Gausman himself even said that if anyone were to ask him what his best pitches were at any point in his career, he would have answered his fastball and his splitter. His fastball is still one of the best pitches, even though he's not throwing it as hard as he used to. For Anthony DeSclefani, he's increased his slider and changeup usage rate while throwing his fastball and curveball less. Now we have to move on to the position players. Buster Posey, the National League MVP in 2012, a 7-time All-Star including this year, a key part of 3 championship teams for the Giants in 2010, 12, and 14, 4 Silver Sluggers, a Gold Glove, 2 Wilson Defensive Player of the Year awards. He's already a San Francisco Giants legend, but in 2019, at just 32 years old, his numbers took a huge dip, and it looked like his best days were behind him after hip surgery prematurely ended his 2018 season. He and his wife adopted newborn twins last year, which made it in the best interest for Buster Posey to opt out of last year's COVID season. You want to keep your baby safe when you're living in a world of uncertainty, right? This year though, at 34 years old, he's back with a vengeance. He's put up his best numbers since 2017. Defensively, he's still serviceable, but he's not the Gold Glove defensive catcher he used to be. His offensive prowess being back though is most certainly good enough. Perhaps a season of rest was what was best for his body, so he can have more time to heal from hip surgery. It could also be a result of Gabe Kapler managing him really well. It's kind of like the baseball version of load management. Well, catchers need it more than anyone else because they're the ones who take the biggest beatings out of anyone. Buster Posey isn't catching more than 2 days in a row anymore, and he hasn't played first base for even 1 inning this year. Now on to Brandon Crawford, who was never known to hit for average, was always known more for his glove than his bat. This year he's putting up career highs all across the board at the plate, hitting 300 with a 374 on base percentage. And for the first time ever, he has a slugging percentage over 500. He has a WRC plus of 139 and a WOBA of 376. He's been more patient at the plate this year as he has his best walk rate since 2015. He also has his lowest K rate since 2016, which was the last time he was top 15 in the MVP race prior to this year. Although he was one of the premier defensive shortstops in baseball in 2015 and 16, as he had over 20 defensive runs saved in both of those seasons, his defense took a huge hit in 2018 as he had -4 defensive runs saved that year and -10 the following year. Last year he found himself back in the positive range, and this year he likely won't win a Gold Glove, but 4 defensive runs saved is at least above average. He could at least be a finalist for a Gold Glove though. But for him to have a career year at the plate at 34 years old, once again, who would have imagined? Or for him to have a defensive resurgence in his mid-30s. Next, we have Evan Longoria. At 35 years old, he's having his best season in 11 years. He's definitely not someone you expected to be a contributor to the team with the best record in baseball at this point in his career. Granted, he has missed a lot of time as he's only played 71 games this year. But when he has been healthy, he's hitting 291 with a 385 on base percentage, 541 slugging, which gives him an OPS of 926. With a WRC plus of 147 and a WOBA of 389. Next we have Brandon Belt. He isn't exactly hitting for the best average at just 263. However, he does have the best OPS on the team at 942. An OPS plus at 151. He has missed some time due to injury, but when healthy, he has been a very key part of the Giants' success as a left-handed hitter. He hasn't been great defensively though, as he's -4 in defensive runs saved, something he was once consistently in the positive range in the past. He's at least making up for it by hitting for decent power from the left side, as he has 26 home runs and 54 RBIs in 91 games with an ISO of 316, which is pretty much extra base hits per at bat. Like much of the team, the K rate is over 20%. That could be a concern for the playoffs. At least for now though, he's doing very good things for the Giants and doing much better than anyone expected. Sure, he did hit 309 with a 425 on base and 591 slugging percentage last year. It was a short season though, 2017 to 19. His production was very down from what it is now and what it was in 2012, 13, 15, and 16. Now, we have a guy who, after 5 years that were not so amazing with the Phillies, where he only played over 100 games once during that stretch, before 3 years in the KBO, could you imagine a guy like that at 35 years old being an important part of a World Series contending team? That's Darin Ruf for you. This year, his batting average is kind of at 268, but he's an on-base machine with a 387 on-base percentage. He is a high strikeout, high walk rate guy. Striking out a lot is definitely not a good thing, but it doesn't always mean that you're a bad player, obviously. Ruff's WRC plus this year is 143 and his WOBA is 383, so outside of the high K rate, he's still doing very well for the Giants. Defensively, he's been passable at first base, and he has shown that he is capable of playing in left and right field. Of all these unlikely contributors that the Giants have had this year, perhaps Darin Ruf might be the most unlikely contributor, being 35 and having spent the last 3 years of his career in the KBO and having his best major league season at the age of 35. I mean, you almost never see this kind of stuff. Then, of course, there is the trade deadline acquisition from the Cubs, Kris Bryant, who I cannot go without mentioning. He has done noticeably better as a Giant this year than he has with the Cubs. Perhaps this is because he's just more motivated now that he's back in a winning situation. Also, LaMonte Wade Jr., another guy who's an unlikely contributor. I almost didn't include him in the script, but I will talk about him too after he drove in the winning run against the Padres 2 nights ago. And for the season, his average is alright, his on-base percentage is decent, he has a slugging percentage over 500, so his OPS is a very solid 858. He has a WRC plus over 130, but most of all, he's been extremely clutch, as he's hitting 600 in the 9th inning and delivered yet another big hit for the Giants to help win the first of this 3-game set against the Padres so that they can stay in first place despite an off night from their ace. He's the only position player that I just went in depth about at all. That's under 30, he's 27. I also have to talk about his defense a little bit. He's been pretty good in left field. So yeah, all these misfits coming together to put up 99 wins this year with 10 games left to go. Now we have to get to the manager of this team. Someone I admit I thought the Giants made a huge mistake when they hired. I know not just me though.
Gabe Kapler was so incredibly bad. He was probably the second worst manager in baseball behind Mickey Callaway because both of those guys, I mean, horrible. Mickey bad for his own reasons. Gabe Kapler a little different. He was the biggest micromanager I've ever seen in Major League Baseball from what I can remember. I mean, it seemed like every single decision he needed to be on top of it, and that's not a bad thing, but also at the same time, he was the one making the phone calls to the bullpen. It seemed like he was the one who was talking to players. He was the one who was doing this and that. He just had his hands in too much, and I know I'm making it sound like him being involved was a bad thing, but micromanaging and being involved and having a clue is different, and he was just clearly micromanaging. He was like a helicopter parent, like you're doing your homework and they're like, did you check that answer? It's like, oh my god, let me think, let me do what I'm doing. It just felt like Gabe Kapler was constantly on top of everyone and not in a good way. Also, not to mention, he made some terrible decisions manager-wise. I mean, the bullpen he handled, he didn't have a great bullpen, but there was a lot of times where you go, what were you doing? And even the lineup sometimes, it was just like, I didn't like his decision-making, especially against the Mets. Like, there was games where I was like, really? That's what you're gonna do? And then you got Mickey Callaway who'd step in and be like, don't worry, Gabe, I got you. I'll take over. Gabe Kapler, I thought, held them back.
His very first game as the Phillies manager, he pulled Aaron Nola after 68 pitches when he was doing more than just fine. 1 run in 5 1/3 innings. I understand not going over 90 pitches that early in the season, but under 70 when your starter is doing fine, that's definitely not good managing, especially when your bullpen gets lit up after that. That was probably the first red flag for the Phillies back then. He also once tried to make a pitching change with no one warming in the bullpen. It's not his fault that the Phillies had no bullpen at all, or pretty much no pitching at all outside of Aaron Nola during his time there. And even Aaron Nola had some consistency problems. Gabe Kapler still didn't manage what he had well at all though. In fact, here are what Giants fans themselves had to say about the hiring of Gabe Kapler. Although those who said they won't root for the Giants anymore if they hire Kapler, I wouldn't welcome you back if I were a Giants fan. I'll still love the Yankees even if they give Aaron Boone a lifelong contract. Yes, I would be pissed off if they did that. You might even see me break something if that ever happens, but I'll never ever think about not rooting for the Yankees anymore, regardless of who's managing the team, no matter what moves they make, whether I approve of it or not. Here in San Francisco though, he must be doing something right for the team to be as good as they are when everyone, including myself, expected the NL West to be a tight race between the Dodgers and Padres, with the Giants being no better than a third place team. He has to be the National League Manager of the Year this year. It's a no-brainer. He just seems to have figured out how to bring the best out of everybody. One thing I saw on the San Francisco Chronicle, I have to subscribe to actually read the article, but I saw the headline, so I saw that he finds himself to be more open-minded now. So it's definitely safe to say that there are things he's doing better himself now than he was back then. Like I mentioned earlier, how he's managed Buster Posey's playing time could be a contributing factor to Buster Posey's resurgence. Donnie Ecker, the hitting coach, I definitely think he deserves credit too for being able to get that many guys well in their 30s, have career resurgences or breakout years. The fact that they are a team that strikes out quite a bit may be concerning, but I think he must be doing something right to get all these misfits to perform at the level that they're performing at. If the Giants sweep the Padres, that would get them 100 wins. If they don't sweep the Padres, they'll definitely accomplish that against the Rockies in the next series. That would make it the first time since 2003 that the team has been able to win at least 100 games. With 10 games left to go. Oh, 103 for the first time since 1993. That's definitely more than doable. 1993 was Barry Bonds' first year with the team and the year I was born. The Giants are definitely likely to win even more than that though. The last time the Giants won more than that was all the way back in 1905. So that's pretty much the story of this year's San Francisco Giants. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate it if you give me a thumbs up on this video. That'd be much appreciated so we can get this out to more people. If you still haven't subscribed yet, if you could please consider doing that, that'd be much appreciated. And if you can hit the notification bell, that'd be much appreciated as well. Please let me know how many games you think the Giants will win by the end of the year. Do you think this team will win the World Series? I sure would love to see a Cinderella story end with the World Series title, unless my Yankees really do get hot at the right time and end up playing the Giants in the World Series. Okay then, of course I hope the Yankees do put an end to their Cinderella story and break their hearts. Obviously I am not expecting that to happen, absolutely not. I sure would love to see it though, and I sure would love to be wrong. But again, if you could please let me know what you think. I do think the fact that they are that great pitching wise, and they're at least decent defensively as their 8th in defensive runs saved this year, that should have them in good hands. Although the fact that they have the 10th highest K rate in baseball this year, that's something I would definitely be concerned about. Buster Posey and Brandon Crawford are the only two regulars on this team striking out less than 20% of the time. Still though, I'd love to hear what you guys think, so that'll do it for now. Thank you so much for watching. It was definitely great to be back from this week-long hiatus, so if you want to check out what I've done before, if you're new, if you want to click either of these right here, that'd be much appreciated. Alright, I'll see you next time. Peace.